Neil deGrasse Tyson is in the studio. Always great to see you again, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. I miss you. I go a few months, and I need more Adam Carolla.
Letters from an Astrophysicist is the name of the new book. It's available as we speak. You go to Amazon and bookmark us and click on through, and everyone will be happy. It must be good to be you.
Okay, I need further explanation on that one.
I will. I will explain. I'm a pretty accomplished guy, and I've done a lot of good things in my life, but I'm also sort of regarded as a douchebag as well, which I understand. And you...
It's the self-awareness that's the first step.
I understand people think I'm a douchebag.
To solving that problem.
You are one of those guys. I have a list of guys where you'd like to say, you know what I mean? Like if you were at a cocktail party, you'd like to say, oh, yeah, I was talking to Keith Richards at this cocktail party. You know, I feel like you're sort of in, Seth MacFarlane's in there. You're in that pantheon of guys. As much as Ryan Seacrest makes more than our two combined salaries with 3 zeros behind it, no one really wants to go, I was at a cocktail party and I got to talk to Ryan Seacrest. You know what I'm saying? It's not a knock on Ryan Seacrest. It's more of a kudos to you.
Well, okay, thank you for that. And if that's true, it's only true, I think, because I hold as a very high priority that in the time I spend with someone, that they know a little bit more about the natural world at the end of that conversation than when they began. That's kind of the educator in me. And so, and plus, my goal is that they become empowered by that knowledge. You do a lot of that on your own show. You've got a lot of repository knowledge that comes out and insights into building, into the environment, into nature, into interpersonal interactions. And when you come away, say, "Wow, I'm a little better off for having spent that time." And that's I think so then people value their time with you, or what even if it was virtual through a video. Whereas Ryan Seacrest, I don't know that anyone, I don't know his whole portfolio, but I've never heard anyone say, yeah, I watched Ryan Seacrest and I'm so much more enlightened now than I was an hour ago. So that could be it. I don't know.
I am absolutely flummoxed by people's ability to sort of waste time and other people's time and their own time, meaning like, I want a microphone, but I have nothing to say. But I like the idea of talking into a microphone. And I've always been kind of, so I've always said, well, first off, the best thing anyone can ever say to me, and it's said to me often when I do shows and I'm signing autographs and taking pictures after the show, that somebody will inevitably come up to me and say, I was... hit a rough patch about 3 years ago. I had a really messy divorce. I was really down in a dark place, and you really helped me get through a lot of it. And I go, I don't even know what I said. And they go, no, just the connection. Just it was good.
Being you.
You got me through it. Thank you. And I go, that's the best thing you can say to me. So what I never really understand about some human beings is, when I used to do a morning radio show, once in a while people would roll in there and you could tell they were just tired and their publicist pushed them and they stayed out too late that night before.
A guest, yeah.
Yeah, a guest. And they sometimes they were comedians or actors or whatever, but they just sort of were sitting there kind of flatlining.
Phoning in the interview.
Yeah, they'd be in the studio, but they were still phoning it in.
Metaphorically.
Right. Yeah, I know what you meant. They were physically there phoning it in. And then they would, talk to them for 18 minutes, and then they would leave, and they'd immediately start looking at their phone and walk out the door. And I think to myself, look, we're just sitting in this empty room together with a couple other people, engineer through the window, whatever. The building's, it's 7:45 in the morning. There's no one else in the building, blah, blah, blah. But these microphones are attached to what would be 10 Rose Bowls filled to capacity.
Yes.
And those people are sitting in, what if you had a microphone? What if you were going full Lou Gehrig. You just had a microphone and Yankee Stadium was filled up. Would you sidle up to that microphone and say nothing?
What an image you just conjured. I don't know if the next generation knows that image. When he retires from
Lou
baseball.
Gehrig, right.
Yeah. And there's that echo.
Right.
And
Luckiest
the luckiest man
But
on
what
earth.
I'm saying is this is not one Yankee Stadium. I'm on in 13 markets. And number one, you have 2 million people listening. Why are you so casual with this? Mm-hmm. And I know they're not doing the math. They're looking at me and the one engineer that's falling asleep through the window. That's the math they're doing.
I'm always doing the math. You can probably trust me on that one. No, it's not just the math. It's I value when someone else becomes enlightened, regardless of what the cause is, but especially if I had something to do with it. And in this volume, this Letters from an Astrophysicist, they're harping on what you just said, with people come up to you after your talk and say, wow, you got me through that. You helped change my life. These are letters from people. They're not just letters or how far away is the sun or how hot was the universe. These are people who are reaching for answers or guidance. They're looking for a cosmic perspective to illuminate the next decision they might have to make in their life. And no, it's not me who's doing that. I'm a conduit for them to the cosmos, and I draw insights and inspirations from the universe that may help them. And in fact, in many cases it did. There's someone there who had just been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he wrote a letter to his favorite professors, and I got one of those letters. And he said, you helped me enlighten my life and make my life worth living, even though it's been cut short. Just to see that kind of testimony. And there's another one I'll just tell you. There's one of my more interesting letters in this volume. By the way, it's over 30 years of. There was a while when my email was public, actually, and I actually replied to people's emails. Not anymore, but this is culled from that many years of people in search of wisdom and insight. There's a woman who's raising a child. The child is 10 years old. She said, I'm doing what generations of parents have done before me. I'm taking my child to Hebrew school so he can learn where he came from and what his roots are. And by the way, he's on this autism spectrum, but he comes home and says that God can't be real and that the Bible is just fairy tales. And she said, well, where did you get this? And he kept talking, and he said that the earth began in a big bang and the universe will end in a black hole. And so she's very concerned. And she said, how did you learn it? And he said, cosmos. And so she writes me a letter. So it's like, I'm in deep shit now, okay?
Right.
So what's going on here? And so I wrote back, and I said, and so that exchange is in this book.
Right.
What I said was, this is a free country. He's going to move away eventually, and he'll think whatever he wants, and you won't be able to control everything he thinks. But think of it this way. If he takes everything literally and is not very good with figurative or faith-based thinking, which may be true for when you're on the autism spectrum, everything is taken on face value, right? There's very little sort of interpretation going on. I said the Jewish traditions are very rich with cultural expression. There's the Seder, there's the lighting the menorah during Hanukkah. There's a lot of sort of ritual. And my response was to have her and her son, instead of worrying about literal translations of the Bible, to think about the role of religion in terms of ritual and how that brings people together.
Right.
And it promotes social interaction, which is the kind of practice an autistic kid might need. Mm-hmm. And so I came at it from that direction, and she was very appreciative of it. And I felt good that I could contribute something to her parenting in that regard. I'm intrigued when people come to me with these kinds of issues. There's a prisoner who's doing 7 years for aggravated vehicular manslaughter. Which means he killed somebody, all right? Mm-hmm. He was raving drunk. And his 2 kids are teenagers now. And 7 years while your 2 kids are aged 12 and 13, 14. So
it's a lifetime for them.
It's a lifetime. And he wanted to know, he learned that his kids were interested in STEM fields. And one of them wants to be a space veterinarian. And,
wow.
And so I thought and he wanted to know what way I can send things their way to help them on their search. So that they would know that he still loved them and cared for them. if they knew that I sent something the way prompted by him. This is, and so I mean, I well up just rereading these exchanges that have been in my files for years. So it's basically the universe serving as a kind of guide for people. Plus, there's the guy who wants to know if Bigfoot is running amok in the Pacific Northwest. That guy's in there too.
How much?
We all have a Bigfoot friend, I'm sure.
How much of this have you ever thought about? I maybe never have. So it's like sometimes people build a hospital so they can put their name on it. And then some people have a problem with that. Like that rich guy just wanted his name on it.
Yeah,
I always go, hey, man, we got a hospital. That's my point.
Yeah. Well, he wants really good care when there's on his way out, right?
Yeah, but a lot of people kind of read stuff into something. Like I remember once there was a news story and Mark Zuckerberg had given $3 million to
lunch money,
malaria, whatever. Yeah, that's what it was. A person next to me said that's nothing for him. And I said, yeah, it's $3 million more than they had.
Right.
I mean, that's you can look at it as the mosquito net is half full or half empty. My world, this person's world is that's nothing. My world is that's $3 million more than they had, and it's $3 million more than you've given.
Right.
So,
okay. End of conversation. Yeah.
It's also $3 million more than I've given. So I'm not saying shit.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. And so when you help people, some people have that sort of just capacity to help people, a desire to help people. You have that desire. Is that desire make you feel better? I mean, again, putting the name on the hospital example.
That's a great question. And I think I can speak for most educators, dare I say. I'm just going to say that. For most educators, you want to stimulate curiosity in people so that they can go on and learn on their own, so that they can value knowledge and being inquisitive and curious. This is something that I don't think is taught in schools, by the way, which is why you have kids on the last day of school tossing their notes in the air saying, school's out.
Right.
Like they're happy that they no longer have to learn when their only job was to learn. Something's missing in our school system when given the fact that people behave that way tells you something's missing in our school system. So getting back to your comment about a fan coming up to you. So for me, the ideal encounter with a fan is they come up to me and say, wow, you Neil deGrasse Tyson? I said, yes. Tell me more about black holes, because I read something that you wrote and that got me thinking. And so they come up to me. They're not asking my favorite color. They don't even want a selfie.
Right.
I'm just sort of this conduit for them to access knowledge that they're in search of. And then I say to myself, I have succeeded. Yeah. Because I am not the object of their affection. And it's very hard for a famous actor or many other famous pathways in life to not be the object of someone's affection. Right. It's very hard for that. And so for me, my measure of success is how often people tell me that I stimulated this other interest of theirs. And so then I'm not even in the equation. And that's why I know I succeeded. Otherwise, it's cult building. What are you doing? It's like, I don't, that's not what I'm after here.
I'm glad you talked about school. I've said to people a million times, you have to be curious. If you're not curious, it's not going to work.
Nothing works.
Otherwise, you're just sitting in some camp where they're trying to indoctrinate you with knowledge of stats, numbers, dates. Here's when the war was fought. Here's how many soldiers died. Here's what the war was over. You're not interested. You absorb it momentarily.
For the test, yeah.
You regurgitate it during the test. Hopefully you got close enough to what the teacher said, and then it's immediately out of your brain. I have had conversations with that man you see behind the glass, Chris Loxamana. And I've told him many times when I've been said, I want you to go, I want you to look this thing up, then I want you to find, and he's like feverishly writing down, and I stop and I go, stop writing stuff down. I want you to understand what we're doing. Yeah. If you're just writing stuff down as fast as I talk, you're just, first off, you're just a stenographer. Right. You're not really a creator, number one. But number two, that is going to get fucked up 10 ways to Sunday because it's you're never going to understand. And so I've had a lot of conversations with Chris, but also with guys I build stuff with, where I go, stop, just listen to me. I want you to understand what we're doing. And then when you understand it, once you understand it, you don't need verbatim anymore. You understand what we are doing.
And what the needs are, and then the solution can come from an understanding.
You don't have to call me in 20 minutes and go, what did you say to do about the thing? You'll go, you will understand. I can build things because I understand how to build. No one has to walk me through it. It may be a different order than the way you might do it, but once you understand, and when you work with people, especially in the physical world, but you know it in your world as well, who are expert fabricators and who sort of understand things, then they're right with you all the way through. When you're explaining, I had a conversation with a guy today about welding on a gusset, and he was asking me about it, and I was just explaining to him, the load is a shear load, the load's going down, the gusset's not going to help us in the shear load, and blah, blah, blah. And he was just like looking at me going, yeah, I get you. I know, because he understood. Right. He understands. Right. So memorizing shit never helps you understand. So you can fake your way through school, but eventually that party ends.
My version of that story, which I tell often, is imagine you're an architect and you're about to hire an intern for the summer, and they're two basically identical candidates on paper. So now there's the interview. And this is a contrived example, but the point is very clear. So one of them comes in, and you point out the window, and now is the interview part. And there's a church steeple out the window. And you say, by the way, do you know how tall that church steeple is? Oh, yes, it's 136 feet. And so how do you know? Well, I've studied the heights of all major structures of all cities, and I just know that. Okay, the next person comes in. Say, do you know the height of that church steeple? No, actually. I'll be right back. They go out for 10 minutes and come back in. I think it's somewhere between 130 and 140 feet. Say, well, how do you know that? Well, I walked outside. I know how tall I am, and I measured the length of my shadow. Mm-hmm. So I measured the length of the shadow of the church steeple, and I did the ratios, and that's how I come. So who are you going to hire?
Right. Shadow guy.
Yeah, you're going to hire the shadow person. That's right, because they've figured it out. And maybe the other person...
I'd hire both of them, actually, in this scenario. But
No, but problem solving is not something that ever happens because you memorize something by rote. That's all I'm saying here.
Right. And it's a big part, and I'm very interested in your thoughts on this. So I have been watching our society sort of unravel like a sweater that a lapdog got a hold of a loose string, and it's just pulling it, and it's just slowly coming undone. And I was saying to Dr. Drew yesterday, I said, we are going from a analog physical world into a digital world, and we're moving there very quickly. And I've always tried to extol the virtues of doing things with your hands and putting things together and building and being on your feet and problem solving and sweating.
Getting off your ass.
Right. And everyone else's sort of thought is I make money, let some other schmuck come to the house and put up the shelves. But what they're missing is the experience of putting up the shelves when they're just farming everything out. So the thought I was floating to Dr. Drew, and I'd be curious what your thought was, is when you work on a farm, as 80% of the population did 150 years ago, or you're a blacksmith, or you're a logger, or whatever it is you live right in the middle of the tangible physical world all the time. You have to get up at 6. You have to go milk cows. You have to collect eggs. You have to feed and slop pigs. You have to mend fences. Like every single day is a obstacle course for your brain to engage. And
not only that, there's the stimulation, the smell, the taste, the texture.
Right.
You're feeling it. You're touching it. You're immersed in it. Yeah.
There's no such thing as waking up, sitting on your sofa, cranking up the air conditioning, and staring at your smartphone for 3 hours. It doesn't exist. So some people went to a factory or a mill. Other people went to a farm. Other people are loggers. Either way, even though there were, milkmen and the guy worked at the bread factory, whatever it is. But the entire society was in this sort of analog physical world where they were engaged. And then when they came home, they were tired from working all day, and they sat down and read the newspaper or ate dinner, whatever. Okay, we are now switching to this digital world where food, I mean, goddamn, I saw a guy bringing Taco Bell to my house the other day. I was like, are you shitting me? This chick was just walking up my driveway. And I'm like, who is this chick walking up my driveway, and why is she bringing her lunch? And I'm like, I'm so old school. If you're carrying a bag of Taco Bell and walking to my front door, you're eating lunch on my porch. That's what I think. I don't know if she's dropping it off to my daughter, which I can't stand. But either way, we're there. So we've built gyms because we understand, okay, you're not a farmer anymore. You're not up on your feet working on repairing a thatched roof or whatever. You're not burning calories. We built a gym with treadmills and things to simulate work. But we didn't do anything for the mind. Mm-hmm. We didn't work that one out. And we're there so fast that I think a lot of people are suffering. I think a lot of people weren't ready for this.
First, I agree but every time this has happened throughout history, there have been adjustment pains. And it takes a time to just figure out what's the best use of the technology that has descended upon us. And so I try not to judge what's happening in the moment, because I don't want to be that guy 100 years later that they look back on and say, oh, he was clueless. They look at what he said. For example, when writing was invented, there was the deep concern, oh my gosh, with writing, what will happen to human memory? Oh my gosh, now you don't have to remember anything. That'll be the end of civilization. You know, with the invention of the printing press, you look at what people described with the invention of the telegraph. It was like, wait a minute, it used to be that you have to sit down and write a letter, and then someone would carry it to a destination. You get to reflect on it. Now you can tell someone your emotions in an instant. That can't be good, because you didn't get to reflect on it. You didn't get to digest what might have been a thought that you would regret later. And so I think all these technologies have these issues. Here's something to remember. How long did it take after the printing press did someone figure out maybe we could put news on print and then sell a newspaper? That took hundreds of years just to invent a newspaper. Just think about that. So here we are with social media and all this world that has taken us by storm in the last 10 years. Maybe we're still infants figuring out how to manage and shepherd our own inventions.
I agree with you, and I've always been sort of philosophical about it, which is, all right, so we had cab drivers, and now we have Uber drivers. And
you don't want to be the guy that, get off my lawn, the old man in the rocking chair.
I agree. I have spoken to experts, if there can be such a thing in this field, and they have said, I said, look, there were horses and buggies, and then cars came around, and the guys who shoed horses were out of work, but they had to find other work. Right. And so there'll be long haul truckers, and pretty soon the trucks will be automated. And those guys, I sort of said, what's the difference? We're just going to keep moving forward. It's always worked out. He said the difference now is computers, and it's happening fast.
Yeah.
Whereas the horse shoer and the blacksmith, that took 30 years.
It took the rest of their lifetime.
Right. So now it's happening in 10 minutes.
So the next generation wouldn't become the blacksmith, and you died as a blacksmith, and then that was the transition.
Right.
So now it's happening in shorter than a human lifetime, shorter than the job cycles that we go through in our society.
That's what he was kind of saying.
Yeah, so first, I agree. Second, the biggest challenge going forward is this huge population of people who, coming out of high school, go to work in factories or whatever else, or have jobs that will, as sure as night follows day, become automated. What happens to this community of people? And it's not just in one industry, it's across all industries. And I'm convinced that in the future, the only jobs that are really secure will be stand-up comedians and construction workers. Because right now,
done. Those are my two jobs. It's the only two things I do.
Right thing. I can't imagine AI being a great comedian. I don't see that happening. And AI will do a lot of jobs for people, but construction, you still got to pick up the I-beam and put it in place. I thought in New York City, so I don't think of building a home. I think of putting up the skyscrapers.
Yeah,
right.
But certainly even doing a home. I mean, I can't imagine. something as advanced as the stuff we need to do when you do just even hanging drywall.
Exactly. So if it does happen, it would be one of the last things that happen.
Well, also one of the things I think would be, which is you hire some guys for $18 an hour to hang drywall. The machine that would hang drywall would be $750,000. You know, like you'd be better off just paying the guys you got out of the Home Depot.
And it's not going to walk up the steps to get the drywall in the upstairs.
Well,
right.
The $1.7 million one will. Or you can get the guys
stair climbing drywall.
Or you get the guys from Home Depot. Like that's
right. The retired guys who are they still there? The retired guys,
possibly the Hispanic guys. But either way,
right.
Yeah.
So that's an issue. What do you do with the labor force, which is huge, that will be displaced? I read a statistic, and I keep trying to figure it out, and I believe it, but I haven't confirmed the numbers on it. Some number like 70% of all men in the United States have jobs that involve driving.
Really?
So you add it up. There's like truck drivers, cab drivers. So car service, Uber, yellow cab, as well, forklift drivers, delivery car drivers, FedEx, UPS. This just keeps adding up. And you ever driving on a busy freeway? Trucks are all during the daytime. Trucks are all over the place. Somebody's driving that truck.
Right.
Okay, and so the day all driving becomes self-driving trucks and cars, all of those folks are out of work.
Right.
Basically.
Right.
So I don't know that we have enough foresight to resolve that. And you're absolutely right. If it takes 30 years to switch from horses to cars, you can die a blacksmith if you were born one. But right now you can't die a FedEx driver because I'm pretty sure within 10 years they're not going to be any.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back with Neil deGrasse Tyson right after this. Back with Neil deGrasse Tyson, my favorite. In so many ways.
You say that to all your guests.
No, though I do get to talk to a lot of really interesting people in this studio, and it's a blessing, and I should not take it for granted. I should really understand that getting to be able to speak to guys like you, or even guys like Bryan Cranston or something, like have a real long form interesting conversation.
Long form conversations are. It's a dying breed.
It's such a blessing. Let's talk about power and about potential power. And there's always the talk about the Green New Deal and wind and solar and all that. I like the possibility of nuclear power. I always understand it's got a bunch of baggage attached to it. You hear about other possible breakthroughs in creating of power. Now, it seems to me I am wired for efficiency. I love the idea of all the new tech power stuff. When I'm driving to Palm Springs and I see the wind farms, it just doesn't feel as cutting edge to me. It feels kind of cool. And it feels interesting, and it checks some boxes like, oh, look at us capturing the wind or harnessing the wind.
So it's a modern windmill from the old Dutch days, right?
It doesn't feel, it feels about 600 years old, Like, it doesn't feel that new to me. Mm-hmm. When I hear that a nuclear sub can stay underwater for 8 months and be powered by something the size of a tennis ball and not create any emissions, I go, well, that sounds like the future if it's safe. Where are we with that? Is the wind and the solar, the solar, I had a guy come over to the solar. It's like the solar thing is like, the solar sounds like the future, and then the guy comes to your house and he goes, it's going to be about $110,000, but don't worry, you'll pay it off when you're 141 years old. Right. And then you go, what about the city? They have they had a plan, but that actually sunsetted, so they're not doing that anymore. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, all right, so I pay $100,000, and then each year I save $11,000 or $9,000 for the next. It just doesn't sound that cutting edge, compelling, or Jesus Christ, you'd be a fool not to kind of thing.
Right. So I'm convinced that in a free society, there's always be a subset of people who will lead a movement. Generally, they're people who are financially capable of doing so because they'll do it because it's a good idea, not because they're going to make money on it. And for it to actually sweep all of society, it's got to be something that makes economic sense to the person who shops at Walmart and needs the deal. All right, the Walmart person's not going to put on solar panels if they're not going to recoup the savings for 50 years. It's not going to happen.
Right.
And so if you want something, I mean, you can try to make it happen. I don't want to stop people who are trying to convince the hearts and minds. But when you really look at things that have shifted in society, that's how it happened. Why did we really stop killing whales? Why? Was it because all of a sudden people said, oh, no, these are beautiful large creatures? No, we found oil in the ground.
Right.
Okay? Then you had the luxury of saying, well, let's continue to protect the whales. And now you can do it in a real way because your other needs have been met.
Right. Let me just jump in for a second. When whales were being slaughtered the way they were being slaughtered here, still some Japanese whaling going on, but when we used to do that, I am sure there were the descendants of Bob Barker and Leonardo DiCaprio who were pissed off about it. I'm sure Bob Barker's great-grandfather was pissed. But that was way less than 10% of society.
Yes.
Everyone else wanted cheap oil to run their lanterns on.
Correct.
So they said, what about the slaughter of these majestic animals? And the person just pointed at their lantern and went, well, I do need the lantern.
Right.
And so we did things that were spiritually or morally a little wrong in the name of convenience. And that's how all of humanity is. 5% are we're going to do the right thing. And 95% is we want the cheapest shit. We don't care where it was made or who made it.
Exactly.
So until you can get this to the 95%, and the 95% isn't going to do the right thing for the sake of doing the right thing. They're going to do the right thing because it's cheaper, and they don't even care about what thing it is.
Experience tells us this. So now, one of the problems in this equation is the consumption of oil is not fully priced into the price of oil. So, for example, just to remember, when roads were built, our tax money built roads. That enabled car companies to sell cars. If you paid... If the price of gas contained the price of the cost of making all the roads to drive the car on, it would be way higher than anything we ever paid for it. And then you'd see the true cost to you of using that technology, the internal combustion engine. So things are kind of, costs are, the actual price of things are kind of hidden within various sectors in society. But let me make some broad statements about power. So wind, hydro, obviously solar panels, all of that is basically solar energy. You get wind because the unequal heating of air on Earth's surface by the sun. So I think of all of that as being solar derivative. One of my favorite concepts was written in a book called Turning Oil into Salt. I don't know if you ever heard of this word.
No.
I'll tell you quickly about it. By the way, do you know where your salt comes from? No, of course you don't.
No, I have a recollection because I spoke to you about this once.
Did we already talk about it?
Well, I want to see if I'm a good student.
I don't remember.
I want to see if I'm a good student.
Maybe we already talked about it. I'll skip that and talk about something else.
Well, the people that are listening are horrible students, so we should repeat it for them. I believe you said it was all sea salt because sea inhabited most of the land and then receded. So the stuff that's in the ground inland that you look at as sort of mined ground salt is in fact sea salt.
Yeah, basically it's all sea salt. It all comes from the seas.
See, you fuckers, I listen.
Seas metaphorically.
By the way, that's why don't pull that shit with me where you go, I told you 7:30. You didn't say anything. No, I listen when people talk. Thank you. You're welcome.
Now, my tweet actually was criticized by some geologist who said, well, a lot of our salt comes from surface salt. When I think of a mine, I think of something underground.
Right.
But mining is more general than that, of course. And so had the tweet been more complete, it would have said salt from the surface or from million-year-old mine deposits. It's all from water. It's all from seas, right? And so seas in a poetic sense.
Right, but it's sort of all sea salt.
It's basically all sea salt. But that's not the point I was making. The point I was making was salt used to be a strategic commodity in the world.
Right.
Did you know that General Grant bombed the reserves, the salt reserves of General Lee in the South to prevent them from having food over the winter because salt was used as a preservative for food. Okay.
Right.
So what happens? Time moves on. We learn about canning. Oh my gosh, you can preserve with canning and you don't need the salt. Oh, we have electricity. We have refrigeration. We have freezers. All of a sudden, there's 9 ways to preserve food over the winter that don't depend on salt. So the price of salt drops. Salt is no longer strategic, and it's just one of many ways you can preserve foods. Okay, imagine energy coming from 12 different kinds of places, and you had access to any one of them at any given time. That way, each of those branches of energy production can compete with each other economically. And do we have that now? Kind of, sort of way. It's if you plug something into the wall, do you care how that energy was made? Do you know how that energy is made? No. Was it made by wind, coal, oil? Was it nukes? You don't even know. Okay, but your electric company knows, and they will jockey for whatever is the cheapest energy available to them. Transportation right now is the number one consumer of our oil economy. And that's all built in the movement of goods and services and agriculture. And so it all uses oil. And you can't have 7 nozzles on your vehicle. This will put in energy from sunlight. This is from this. Choose which one is cheapest at the pump. No, you can't. That's not realistic. You'd have 7 engines in your car. They'd all run off of different principles. But plug it in. You plug your car in. Now you can charge your car off of wind, off of nukes, off of whatever it is that is the prevailing cheapest source of energy at the time. That's turning oil into salt. You've rendered oil no longer strategic. It changes the geopolitics of the world.
Right.
And so I'm a fan of all ways people want to make energy. The big challenge is it transportable? Right? Oil is highly transportable. You dig it out over here, you move it 1,000 miles, you fill up your car.
I literally just heard a news story where an oil tanker off the coast of, forget where, Middle East, was embargoed or whatever it is, and it said it had, I believe Chris can look it up, but it had $130 million worth of oil in the belly of it. And I thought, geez, that's why these nations are doing what they're doing. You know what I mean? They suck it out. They put it in a boat. They take the
Transport
boat where they need to go. They unload it. And each time they make a run, there's $130 million in their pocket.
And the oil doesn't lose any energy along the way.
Right.
It's all the same energy it had in the ground as it did where it was. So that's one of the big challenges, and it's a big frontier. We're not there yet. But we kind of have to be. Otherwise, kiss civilization goodbye.
Iranian oil tanker in Syrian waters. And I think it said it was $130 million last month in the belly. Now, so... I love the analogy, which is...
And that was a book. Forgive me for not remembering the woman who wrote the book. It's a book called Turning Oil into Salt. It's a brilliant concept. Into salt.
I find it very interesting that you say that, yes, if you had a car and the car couldn't have 15 gas caps, I'm holding my fingers up in quotes that said wind or solar, fuel or diesel or whatever, anything else, ethanol. But
things as close to each other as diesel and sort of regular fuel, that's still 2 completely different engines.
My wife has a Tesla. She plugs that thing in, and I don't know what percentage is natural gas powered sources, plants versus hydroelectric versus everything else.
You don't know, but
I don't know.
It means no one can ever hold you hostage by jacking up the price of one kind of source of energy.
Am I naive when I say to people all the time, when you look at Chernobyl and you look at even Fukushima, I think was built in like 1971, like when you're looking at 3 Mile Island, when you're looking at some of this stuff, this is old technology.
They're 40, 50 years old,
There's so many strides have been made, and certainly Europe has done a lot of them. They're fail-safe systems and clean versions of this and safe versions of this. Why is it off the table to suggest building a modern facility, nuclear facility, or we'll call it something else, but a facility that just generates electricity minus the coal and all the natural gas or the fracking or whatever, hydroelectric, all the stuff we hate.
But part of it is I think it's just marketing.
And we have this, and then my wife plugs the Tesla in, and that's what fuels her car.
Right. So part of the challenge is is image, right? Radiation is invisible and it can kill you. Ionizing radiation specifically, and we all know. Most of us saw Chernobyl on HBO. Terrifying, horrifying story, and you don't want that to happen to you. And so the magnitude of that fear is huge.
Right.
But I can tell you two things.
But there's Exxon Valdez. You know what I mean? Like, you think everything else is free?
Right. So we don't have an equal fear factor among all sources of danger. We just don't.
Right.
And so you're managing what this looks like. For example, do you know there's a physical principle called nuclear magnetic resonance? It was discovered by, in fact, a physics professor I had in college. He won the Nobel Prize for this. It's a discovery that the nucleus of an atom will respond to basically radiation in such a way that you can tell the mass of that nucleus. It's an interesting fact. It was a discovery. It got a Nobel Prize. A clever medical engineer says, wait a minute, I can make a cavity and put this through the cavity and put you in that cavity, and I can now perform like a three-dimensional X-ray of you, but of soft tissue, because X-rays can't go through soft tissue. This became the MRI, the magnetic resonance imager.
Right.
You know what that is? That's a nuclear magnetic resonance imager. But that's one of the two forbidden N words in our society. Okay? It is, and no one would go into it if the word nuclear was in front of it. So they just drop the N, and they call it magnetic resonance imaging.
Right.
That's what it is. And everyone does it, and everyone recognizes its value.
Right.
So if nukes are going to come up, yeah, we need modern ones that are fail-safe in all the ways that Europe has cared heavily about. But also, it's going to, I think, for it to happen on its own, by its own forces, is other kinds of sources of energy are going to have to go up in price. And you end up saying, well, you're going to pay the high price, or you're going to all of a sudden show that you're going to embrace nuclear energy. That's how these things have worked in the past.
Why isn't anyone who's shepherding the Green New Deal have this as one of the cards in their gin rummy hand?
Well, I think the Green New Deal is very left-based, and if you're very left-based, you're anti-nuke typically. It's a portfolio of thinking that comes together. So, yeah, I'm not surprised. You shouldn't be surprised by that.
No, I'm not surprised, but I'm always flummoxed. It's sort of like when I used to do Loveline and all the anti-abortion.
I forgot you did that. Forgot. How do you remind me of that?
The right version of this is all the people that hate abortions were against the morning after pill. Mm-hmm. And I would explain to them, you hate abortions? And they'd say, yes. I'd go, you should be for this because it'll eliminate the thing you hate. And they go, I'm against it. And then I'd think to myself, are you really against that then? Like, if you want clean energy, then you should be for this. But you're not. Yeah. Because you've been indoctrinated into some sort of system that doesn't really make sense. It's more of just it's an atheist religion that you've now created with the environment.
So the way I look at the Green New Deal, I think its heart is in the right place, and execution, is in the details. I think if we start thinking that way, that can stimulate innovations in that way that would benefit all of us. I think a lot of people are distracted about what exactly did she say? AOC say that can never. We need airplanes. Well, maybe there'll be a new kind of airplane.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not a.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, I agree.
People
I'm not
are jumping up and down.
I think people go a little batty when they're like, what are we going to do? We're not going to be able to fly. No, electric airplanes will never work for another 1,000 years. Like, it's just, people have no idea how tall an order an electric airplane would
unless,
be.
You just get spray-on solar panels, and the whole skin of an airplane is a solar panel. I mean, I'm not going to...
It's still never...
I'm not going to say 1,000 years. You know what we were doing 1,000 years ago, dude?
Yeah, you're right. But we will never live to see an electric airplane. I mean, literally, if you see an electric airplane, it's got one guy laying on it, like pedaling a generator.
Right.
And 1,000.
It's not hauling 500 people.
Wings that are flapping. And it's no way you're going to put 500 people and all their luggage.
Okay,
I don't care about an airplane.
Let me give you a simple rebuttal. You ready?
Yes.
However far away an electric airplane is from today, cannot be farther than landing on the moon was to the Wright brothers. And that was a That was a 66-year delay.
That's insane.
That is how I think about progress.
No, you're right to think that way. And so, as a sort of final statement on energy, we're sort of fossil fuel based. Everyone hates it, but everyone uses the shit out of it.
Yep.
And we're now getting more of it sort of on our own terms versus putting the money, lining the pockets of people we don't want around the world. Which, look, here's my take. My take is, if we in fact need fossil-based fuels to run our economy, to run our society, and currently or formerly we were just bringing it all in from the worst nations in the world and giving them cajillions of dollars, and we figured out to do it sort of nationally versus farming it out, I'm all for it. I'd also like to transition away from it. But my thing as a pragmatist, which is as long as we're hooked on the stuff for now, I'll take the homegrown stuff versus making all the OPEC nations
incremental.
rich.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
And now we're doing a lot more of it on our own terra firma. And now it's time to start moving toward different forms of fuel, which would include nuclear for me. But is there a version? I've talked to other guys that have sort of talked about creating energy through the same, virtually the same technology, a fusion or a fission or something versus moving generator, parts, water flowing, like whatever.
Well, ultimately, it's about the generation of heat and heat,
right?
Boiling water that drives a turbine. Ultimately,
right.
there's a wire plugged into a turbine somewhere, no matter who's making the energy. So that itself is not what's different here. I think the answer is, we have all these ways of making energy. If they're all out there and they're all available, at some point, somebody's going to have to say, we know how to make nukes safe. When cars were invented, people were dying every day in the street because nothing had moved that fast before, really, and they don't know what. And so do you get rid of the car? Or do you say, no, let's put a stoplight?
Right.
No, let's put lanes so you don't crash.
And eventually,
So
how insane is an airbag to the people that we're talking about? That I mean, a pillow is going to deploy before your forehead hits the dash?
Supersonically before in an explosion. So we know the value of cars. We don't abandon the car. We improve the conditions to reduce your risk of dying. Well, so we think we know the risks of nukes. And so we say, well, we don't want this to happen, we don't want that to happen, but we know we value the energy that comes out. It's all about, have you designed the system to the satisfaction of the consumer of that system? Think of airplanes. Oh my gosh. When we grew up, we're about the same age, at least 100 people a year died in an airplane crash. That was kind of the background level. And now any airplane crash is, holy shit, a plane crashed.
Right.
And it's and we're flying more than ever before. So the FTC, the TSA, thank you. The TSA takes every fatality very seriously and every crash very seriously, and safety mechanisms are put. Now you get on the plane expecting to land safely.
Yes.
And you will be more likely to land safely getting off an airplane than coming in and out of your car. Right? So we've kind of solved that problem.
Yes, I agree.
Yes.
Now,
you don't want to throw the whole thing out just because.
No, I completely agree.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the difference in the analogy of the automobile or the airplane, which I completely agree with, is a lot of folks worked on it every day since people were flying biplanes, covered with canvas, to the new 777 or 888 or whatever it is.
787, the Dreamliner.
The problem, they were toying with 666, and somebody raised their hand.
They're all 7. They all begin and end with a 7. Yeah.
And I wish we'd been doing that with nuclear power as well. The problem, this is like we took...
Very good point.
This is like we stopped with airplanes in 1967, and we haven't picked up a slide rule or a pencil or put anything in a wind tunnel. And now in 2020, someone's going to go, let's get back onto airplane safety.
Yeah,
and it's like, we got a lot of catching up to do. Now, I think
point.
we can use, thank you. We can use Europe, who has been working on their airplanes, metaphor, and go, okay, please tell us what you have learned.
Right.
I believe we could do that. I know you want to talk about cars or race cars as sort of a last subject.
Well, only because it's your thing. Your whole studio is. I feel like I'm in a race car here.
Well, if you go to the other shop, you're going to see a lot more race cars than you see here. But yes, I like race cars because there's a few things I like about race cars. A bunch of things. I love the wild efficiency. I love the part. I was just talking about it yesterday. Like, every time I race one of my vintage race cars, someone goes, how fast are you going? That's the number one question. I go, I don't know. They go, how come you don't know? I go, no.
What's wrong with you?
I go, no speedometer. They go, why not? I go, I have a dashboard filled with gauges, oil temp and oil pressure and water pressure and speedometer. Now, by the way, the tachometer's front and center, and they even tilt it over to its side. They pivot it about 90 degrees to the left, so the red line is straight up. Because you're not interested from 1,000 RPM to 5,000 RPM. You're not that interested. You want to know when it gets to 7,000 and above. No. So they say, why no speedo? I say, it's weight. It's unnecessary. You're driving for time, and you're trying to pass the person in front of you. Then at some point. Plus,
you can calculate your speed from what gear you're in and the tachometer.
Why would you look? Why would you look at your speed? Why would you want to know? You wouldn't want to know. All you'd want to know.
What you're saying is, it doesn't matter. You're in a race. You want to win the race.
It's weight and it's drag too, because you got to turn it. There's a great switch on one of my Pete Brock BRE Datsun Roadsters. There's a switch on the dash, and it says alternator. And I say, what is that switch on the dash that says alternator? Because an alternator is hooked up to a belt and it's running off the crank. And the guy says, that switch shuts down the alternator. And now the car's not going to run for a long time without generating, charging the battery, but it'll run 2 laps off of what's in the battery. And so with about 2 laps left, you flip that switch. And I said, but what does that do? There's a belt going to the alternator. He said it cuts off the electromagnetic current. There's no drag on it.
Electromagnetic drag.
Drag. And he said, I said, what's that get you? And he's like, I don't know, half a horsepower. I said, but the car makes 190 horsepower. And he's like, okay, so that's half more you got. And I'm like, okay, somebody invented that. Somebody was thinking. Yeah. Someone was thinking about it.
Every little bit's there. For my show, Star Talk, we interviewed Mario Andretti. What a gentleman he is.
Literally
nicest guy ever.
Just interviewed the man.
Did you? Okay, yeah. So I just confirmed with him, was he the one who said something like, if you're ever completely in control of your car, you're not in the race.
Right.
So that's hanging out at the red line there. I actually have an article in Car and Driver magazine.
Right.
Do I get street cred with you here?
Yes, literal street cred. I just love it. You stare at a race car and you go, back to the alternator. You go, what the hell's the alternator doing in the back of the car?
So here was my article. It was about acceleration. And I wanted to tell people that the mantra, I feel the need for speed, no, you don't.
No.
It's not even about speed. It's about acceleration.
Absolutely.
Acceleration is everything. That's what you want to feel. And the 3 ways you can accelerate the car. One is you can step on the accelerator pedal. One is you can step on the brake pedal, which slows down the car. That's a negative acceleration, a deceleration. The other is to turn the steering wheel. That changes the direction. That's also an acceleration. And every time your vehicle accelerates, you feel that in your body. You feel the head snapping motion of accelerating forward. You feel a head snapping motion the other way if you stop abruptly. And it's deceleration that kills you in an accident. Right. It's not the speed. It's the deceleration, the rate of deceleration. So when
Dale Earnhardt is dead because of deceleration.
Exactly. And when you browse YouTube, and one of I was there once, I think I had nothing else to do. It was, and they walked. Do you know
Right.
this series? And They Walk?
Sure.
So the cars tumble and there's flames and tires, and 200 yards down the track, the guy just pops out of the car.
Right.
And I said, he went from 200 miles an hour to 0 over 100 yards.
Yes.
That is a very slow deceleration.
Yeah.
When I saw but they say, it's a miracle he survived. No, it's physics.
Yeah.
Okay? When Dale Earnhardt, I saw that crash, and I said, he's dead. He's not walking out of that. He went from 200 miles an hour to 0 in basically a fraction of a second.
Yeah.
And so that severe deceleration is what basically rips apart your body. And so we have this thought that speed is everything. But it's acceleration, deceleration that you feel, that you want to feel when you're passing a car, when you're banking the turn, when why does a car have stiff suspension? So you can feel every jiggle in the road. The feeling of the road is the feeling of how the road is changing the speed and the position of the car, and all of that is acceleration. Right now we're in LA. Do you know you're going 800 miles an hour, being carried along by the rotation of the Earth?
No.
You don't.
My hair doesn't even move.
Yeah, because because the acceleration is very low.
I'm going to blow your mind, my brother.
What's that?
I have this conversation with people all the time.
What's that?
With the speedometer, because they always go, how fast are you going? How fast are you going? I go, listen to me. Hop on a Southwest flight, go to Phoenix. You'll be going 550 miles an hour. You won't even feel it.
You won't even know, and you won't even care.
You'd be sitting there looking at your phone doing nothing.
Correct. Drinking
a cocktail, going to the bathroom.
Right.
That's 550. So what do you care if I say 160, 180, 140?
Right.
What I'm doing on a racetrack, I just got back from Laguna Seca. You turn up turn 5 and you start going up a hill and you hit about 120 and then you get to the front of the corkscrew and you bring it down to 25, 35 miles an hour and you drop down into this corkscrew. Then you get back on it. Then you get back off
There
it.
it is.
That's what I'm explaining to people. Everyone wants,
That's
it's
what
so
you feel.
weird, naive, like the top speed. What's
I'm
the top speed?
completely there with you.
It's all the sensation of the acceleration.
Always.
Mixed with the braking, mixed with the deceleration.
I was on Jay Leno's garage.
Yes.
And we went to Edwards Air Force Base, where they have very long runways. The shuttle lands there when it can't land in Florida. And we drove his jet car.
Yes.
That was crazy. It's like a street, legit jet
Right.
car. And there's a jet engine like right behind your neck in the back of the car. And by the way, he has a stereo system. I said, what are you listening to? There's a freaking jet engine right behind you. So that was fun because we accelerated up. We didn't take it above 150 because
Right.
he could have gone to 250, but he said he didn't want to be the person known for killing Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Well, he already rolled Hemi under glass in a earlier
Oh,
episode.
really? Oh, I didn't see that one.
You didn't
Okay.
see
Oh,
him
wow.
roll?
No.
Oh, there's a famous car called Hemi under glass. It's a wheeling funny car.
Oh,
And
okay.
he rolled it. Not the driver rolled it, but Jay was in it when it
Yeah,
rolled.
Jay was driving his car. I was a passenger in it. Yeah.
Everyone, that's what I keep saying. The sensation is the acceleration.
Yes.
If anyone has flown commercial, my 2 kids have gone faster than me, 5 times faster than me.
5 times faster.
And they can't even fucking drive. Neil deGrasse Tyson, Letters from an Astrophysicist, available now on Amazon. Of course, the podcast, Star Talk Radio. Website, haydenplanetarium.org/Tyson.
Yeah.
You want to watch?
Good.
Want to watch Leno roll a? Watch him roll a car. That's
Watching the video now.
yeah.
Oh.
No hyperbole here. That's roll the car, but he decelerated slowly,
That's it. That's it.
and he did not hit a barrier.
Had he rolled the car and hit a barrier, I don't know if their necks would have not been snapped.
He, I sat here. The man who invented the safety barrier sat where you sat, and we talked for a long time
Oh,
about
that would be whatever. I don't even know what it is, but I can tell what it probably is.
Sure,
it's a cushion.
It gives.
Yeah,
It breaks away.
Yeah, exactly.
It
Exactly.
absorbs energy. All right, Neil. God bless you. Also, the paperback Accessory to War now in paperback available.
Yeah,
now.
that came out last.
Come
month.
back anytime.
dude.
Always a
Thanks for
good
having
time.
me.